Of course, you can grab a copy also of Star, which is covering that story, the Daily Nation as well, why senators want Weta out of minority job. It says colleagues accuse him of being a stumbling block to their collective interest. Meet this morning to seal his fate unless Raila intervenes. The story continues on page 4 and 5 of the Star today. The Daily Nation also carries the same story, and I just want to show you revealed political role for NASA 3 as Raila crafts agreement to work with government alliance partners dig in, demand inclusive dialogue and vow to fight for the NASA agenda, including poll justice. This story continues on page 4 of the Daily Nation today. And allow me to introduce our panelists. I'd done this earlier, but of course, if you're joining us this morning, I can do that for you. We have with us Dr. Boni Khalwale, who is the Deputy Leader of Ford Kenya. Also, we do have with us Dr. Otiende Amollo, who is a Member of Parliament from Rarieda. We do have with us as well MP Jared Okello from Nyando. We do have Senator Kimani Wamatangi as well, who is joining us this morning, Senator from Kiambu. Thank you, gentlemen. Good morning. Good morning. Right, this development and what we have on the Daily Nation today, given to understand there's a meeting today. So is this a make or break meeting for NASA today, Dr. Otiende?
Thank you, Debarl. Allow me to first start by condoling with the families of Kenyans who've lost their life in these floods. As of this morning, I saw in the media, there are up to 20 people who have lost their lives.
Yes.
I think we need to really focus because we keep thinking that this is just a natural disaster, but I think these are preventable deaths, and so we will need to revisit that issue. That said, secondly, the headlines in the Daily Nation promises more than what it delivers inside. You know, it says revealed political role for NASA 3, and when then I read the story inside, there's really nothing.
There's nothing.
Yes, what I thought that I would be seeing a story of what role then one is talking about. And that now brings me back to the question. Is it a make or break meeting? I think it's really just a routine meeting, you know, of the summit. And I think the NASA summit has met, has kept meeting. Even last week we were talking about their last meeting at Manzoni, which my brother here, Dr. Khalwale, also attended. And so I don't think there would be anything out of the way. It is understandable that the NASA meeting would be necessary in light of at least 3 things. One is that in their last meeting in Manzoni, all the 4 principals pledged their support for the dialogue, and you know, and explained that they had engaged with Raila Odinga, and he had explained, and they were ad idem, what we call ad idem. They were in agreement in law, I mean, on that understanding. But then later, we saw that there appeared to have been a change, and at least Kalonzo Musyoka appeared to suggest that they needed a separate meeting with Uhuru Kenyatta. So obviously that would require some explanation. Secondly, is the question of the removal of Senator Moses Wetang'ula as the minority leader, which I think much has been said, and we can talk about that a little later. This is a move which did not originate, and I know that for a fact, from Raila Odinga, but it's a move that was initiated by the senators of their own volition, obviously based on their own reasons. But obviously it is something that you know, would invite some discussion. And thirdly, in light of utterances that suggest that the three of the 4 NASA principals want to go it alone, suggesting that they're now the official opposition, so to speak, and that it is in fact Raila who should now leave NASA so that they can continue as opposition, which is first misguided both in fact and law.
Yes.
But we are only talking about the possible meeting right now. So I would understand that there would be need to have such a meeting at such a time to discuss some of those issues.
Okay. So, and we have James Orengo telling also the NASA core principals, Kalonzo Musyoka, Musalia Mudavadi, and Moses Wetang'ula, that the new found truce is an exclusive affair between President Raila Odinga and, President Uhuru Kenyatta and the Right Honorable Raila Odinga as well. Is this an exclusive affair? from your own estimation? Let's say from Jared Okello.
Thank you, Debarl. Let me also join my brother, Dr. Otiende, in condoling with the families. My constituency, Nyando, is right at the center of flooding. And we have, borne the brunt of this kind of deluge for a long period of time. And it therefore becomes a very bigger and a harsher indictment on the preparedness of the government of the day in light of addressing such disasters. I think a lot therefore need to be done so that we address such issues once and for all. It is interesting, I raised this in Parliament last week, that even though Nyando is known for its flooding, all public servants within the area are never considered for hardship allowances. Even though Muhoroni constituency and Nyakach constituencies, which both sit on either side of my constituency, have this kind of latitude. So I hope it will be resolved in good time. Now, you have alluded to what Honorable James Orengo did mention about the talks being exclusive between Right Honorable Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta. It is true that once you have put somebody into a leadership position, you trust his decisions, you trust his moves, and therefore trust any other deliberation that would come forth. And that is why when Jubilee, put Uhuru Kenyatta into the top echelons, they have full trust in him. We haven't had anyone, including my brother who was sitting on my left, a very good friend of mine, complaining about that particular meeting. And it is quite absurd that all the complaints that have been registered since 9th of March after that meeting are all coming from NASA. And yet, we know the situation this country has been in. We understand that since 8th of August, this country has ground to a halt. Nothing has been moving. And therefore, it is necessary that as a country, we move forward, still addressing the issues that underlie, the issues beneath fundamental concerns of Kenyans. But that is not going to stop Kenya from moving forward. Now, so what therefore James Orengo was alluding to is that we gave Raila Odinga all the trust to champion the interest of NASA together with his followers on our behalf. And if we are going to therefore punch questions or punch holes on the welfare, on the content, and on the progress of these talks, therefore what they are simply saying is that Raila Odinga does not merit any sort of discussion, and therefore as NASA we should push somebody else to take over from those talks. But I want to make it clear that the talks that were held on the 9th of March were preliminary. 2 hours would not be enough to sort out all the issues that have bedeviled this nation since time immemorial. And we have put it quite categorically that firstly, all the cards must be put above the table. And secondly, all the historical issues that have affected the welfare of this country must be fully addressed. And therefore, a meeting that only lasted 2 hours, which to me would be laying the ground for further talks to occur. And by the way, they have since nominated 2 individuals, both, Paul Mwangi and Mr. Kimani, to therefore look at the framework upon which these talks shall be laid.
Thank you.
And if Kimani would be in the country, I understand he's away in the US for this UN conference. I want to believe if he was in the country, then a lot more would have been covered since 9th of March.
All right, thank you. Let's hear from Kimani Wamatangi. Good morning.
Sure, morning, Debarl, and thanks for that clarification, because I was getting a bit concerned. Somebody would have thought that I'm the Kimani who has been nominated.
That is Ambassador Martin Kimani.
And I may have Kenyans stopping me on the street.
Asking me about the progress.
Asking me on the progress. And suffice it to say that I'm like every other Kenyan right now, supporting definitely the outcome the decisions that were made on that day by both leaders to put a lot of other interests aside, political and otherwise, including those of many people that may have been around them and thought they would benefit, and essentially put the country forward, or you know, ahead of everything else. And so a few things come clearly to light, and I think I would want to start by telling the three other NASA principles to probably stop throwing tantrums at this time, you know, and live with the moment, live with changes. Change is inevitable. Life is dynamic. Politics is even more dynamic than one would ever imagine. And I think you know acting the way they're acting, like jilted lovers, if you ask me, I think they will need to change that attitude and the approach they've taken. I'll tell you why I say so. We can say a lot of niceties and run away from the subject, but it is important to call people to what they're doing with a straight face. See, like yesterday, there are images of them all over and statements they made when they were campaigning, the three of them, in Kitui for the candidate. Yeah. And so you ask yourself, as much as you may want to decorate it and make it look like, yes, they are speaking from the same book, why wasn't Raila Odinga there? I mean, and all along we've known they have been agreeing, coalescing, and either waiting for each other and move together. Now that tells you, no matter how much you want to make it look nice, that they're thinking differently. And indeed, although Otiende Amollo, as I hear you when you say that the content contained after reading the headlines, yes, may be scanty, but it is equally telling. You know, I mean, this is a story that is told from what they are doing. You don't need a lot of content in the paper to see. But these gentlemen right now are thinking that they could have, or they may want to have indeed, another political formation or a surge on their own. But two things they need to realize. First is that, you know, the tide of the country, the political tide now has changed. People are moving in a different direction. And people are determined, I tell you. Forget the meeting first between the president and Raila Odinga. But if you listened to every Kenyan immediately after and even before the elections, people wanted to exhale and get on with their lives and do things differently. Actually, if there's anything people wanted, it was a break from the kind of politics we've had. Now, when things have then turned the way they have turned, if anyone, not only those three, would imagine that they can swim against the tide of the entire national psyche, the way the whole country thinks that it is time for this country now to close ranks in between political divisions, ethnic divisions, other issues that have divided us, and deal with issues. But I want to qualify that does not mean, and we are not even expecting ourselves in Jubilee, that means that there should be no, or there will be no either critiquing of government, positive criticism, I mean, and questions asked normally by a political opposition party the way it happens.
Thank you.
So finally, Debarl, let me say this, because this is a question that you posed to, you know, to Otiende Amollo and to him. I would tell, and because Boni Khalwale is sitting here, and you know he's the deputy party leader, as you correctly introduced him, of Ford Kenya. The best shot, their best card right now, is to join the rest of the country if they want to be relevant in politics anymore and in leadership.
Right. So you hold with his view that is the best shot, and you think some of the core principles are swimming against the tide. The psyche of the country right now is moving on. Yes, we are forgetting about the politics of elections, and people are now moving on. Do you hold with this view, Boni Khalwale?
Very interesting times, isn't it? I think more important to me is the state of security of the country. I don't like the way the government is handling police officers. To cut the salaries of policemen is to make the country even more insecure, to allow them to become even more corrupt. That is more important than the politics of Raila and Uhuru,
Yes.
The complaints of Kalonzo, Wetangula, and Davadi. Now, to respond to you, first question I heard you ask Amollo was NASA meeting. The NASA meeting, if it will be there, it's not important. It will be a tiny little housekeeping stuff. The real meeting that will make pronouncements that will make a change in the nature of politics is the one that will come after the respective necks of the NASA constituent parties have held their meetings over the issue of the Raila-Uhuru talks. At the last NASA meeting, we resolved that various necks do their meetings. We have not done. Fort Kenya is doing today. ANC is doing today. WIPE, I'm not sure when they are doing. ODM has done. So that is when it will become a meaningful meeting. The second issue is on what Wetangula, Davadi, and Kalonzo have said in respect of them being firmly in the opposition. I think it is a good thing to hear them say that, and a good thing to hear them say it at the backdrop of what Orengo said. When Orengo said what he did, he was being an honest man. That these were talks between two people, and therefore we should exclusively leave it to them. And that is our problem. Our problem is that we were the people who were begging Uhuru to accept dialogue and begging Raila to accept a dialogue. But they were difficult. Now, when they accepted, we applauded. We were hoping that the talks would be all-inclusive. But because of the pronouncement of Orengo and the fears of some Kenyans, it looks like it was a deal either between Raila and Uhuru, or Uhuru's and Raila's family, or Raila's party, ODM, and Uhuru's party, Jubilee, or Raila's community and Uhuru's community. That is our fear. If it is none of the above, then Orengo should quickly swallow his words and allow the dialogue to be all-inclusive. But if they refuse, then two things obtain. The first one is somebody should look for a doctor to be sitting next to President Uhuru, because President Uhuru might easily fracture his ribs by laughing at Raila. For the simple reason that even 11 days after they met, President Uhuru has given out absolutely nothing. But we hear ODM concession upon concession. They abandon the people's assemblies. We are no longer in government. We are going into, we are no longer in the opposition. We are going into government and all manner of things. So that is the first one, that President Uhuru is dying of laughter. That, I didn't know it would be this nice. The second one is the hygiene of management of the politics of the country. Then it needs to be clear from ODM that therefore you are in government, you should cross the floor, it is allowed, go on the government side, and allow the 50 members of parliament in the National Assembly to play, 50 of ANC, Wiper, and Fort Kenya to play a proper role as the opposition. This will mean, therefore, for members of the public, and I'm glad Otiende is here, that once they cross over,
Thank you.
they will have to abandon leadership of positions reserved for the minority. Those include Public Accounts Committee, Public Investment Committee, leader of majority, leader of minority, leader of minority whip, and so on. They should abandon all those for the politics to be hygienic. If you could give me one more minute, I would speak to why it is important. It is important because for the new arrangement to work, we need to create legislation to establish new offices. I hear Raila is going to be given an office. It would require legislation. You will need legislation to offer financial support for the new structure. You would need technical support. You need legislation for the same. This cannot happen in the absence of an opposition. So you need the opposition to participate in this, to make it hygienic, so that the agenda can succeed.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned about Uhuru Kenyatta, becoming, a barrel of laughters, because of NASA right now. Is the editorial cartoon that we have right now on the smart screen, and of course this is in the Standard today, according to Gado. Looking at that, I think that is a colosseum, right? Is this what you expected from NASA? That yes, everyone will be dismembered, you can see all the extremities are everywhere, but it's a bloody affair within NASA right now. Let's say from Otiende Amollo, looking at that particular editorial cartoon.
Well, that cartoon is misleading, but it's misleading because of the recent utterances by the three other principals. For me, what's going on right now, and I am not most experienced to advise the three principals politically.
Why is it misleading?
Let me explain. I am not well equipped to do that, but let me say this. I think the reaction by William Ruto compared to the reaction by the three other principals in NASA is an education in political dynamism. The person most threatened by the fact that Uhuru and Raila met of their own is not even the three NASA principals. It must be the deputy president. But you must ask yourself, why was William Ruto quick, rather than condemn, but to embrace that meeting? And then to go about town, and he's already hit the ground running, because he realizes the threat of that meeting, but rather than sit down and complain about it, he has decided to see if he can outmaneuver whatever result would come out of it. And that's why I'm saying, for me, that cartoon is misleading, because it suggests that the deputy president, among others, is most happy about it. Given the succession talk within Jubilee, there is no way that the deputy president would be happy about the fact of Uhuru Kenyatta meeting Raila Odinga. But for me, that is the lesson for the other three principles. There was the talk, the handshake, and immediately after that, Uhuru Kenyatta left for Cuba. I think he only came back yesterday. It would be unfair, and it's actually preposterous to say, as my brother Dr. Khalwale is now saying, that why haven't we seen any action since that time? Now, this is where I disagree with my friend Kimani Wamatangi. There are those who view that handshake as an instant of Kenyans excelling, that finally we can now move on. For many of us, we view it as the opportunity to have a situation where we can agree on certain fundamental issues, so that in future, Kenyans can excel forever. And for me, that is the way I see it. Now, my problem with my principles in NASA, one, is that they want to be NASA in Parliament and say there is no NASA outside of Parliament. You see? When they are in, for example, the campaigns yesterday, then you see a situation where they are saying, now ODM should now move to the government side so that we can remain in opposition, which means they are saying there's no NASA. But in Parliament, a day earlier, Senator Wetangula says, we are here as NASA, and I'm the leader as NASA because we were not elected by the individual parties. So you must decide. You can't be saying there's no NASA outside and insist there's NASA inside. Secondly, there is nothing like ODM being in government and that therefore, we have joined government and therefore the rest of the parties should play the role of the opposition. The framework agreement and the handshake was very clear. It is futuristic. It is not present. It is about addressing the fundamental issues in a way that can have us resolve the political problem we've had for the last 55 years. It is not an instance of saying now you cross over, because none of us in Parliament was part of that framework agreement. And that is why Senator Rengo is right in saying, let Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga, who led that initiative, lead us so that we can understand it much more clearly. None of us understands it even as we speak now.
Thank you.
Lastly, the opposition, there is nothing like opposition in parliament. In parliament, we have the majority side and the minority side. We were elected, and because the Jubilee Party in both Senate and Parliament got the majority side, they will always remain the majority. We are in the minority, and we will continue like that. The sheer coincidence is that in this case, the majority party are also the party which has the president.
Thank you.
It need not be that way.
Right, we need to take a short. Well, and that is a probing question. Has the issue been really resolved? Because we're given to understand they're meeting today as well. On that front of the Senate, we want to know why actually he was ousted, and that also is some of the headlines in our dailies today. We will circle back with, of course, the sentiments of Otiende Amollo. Before we took a short break, of course, we all knew, but we want you also to clarify, because we're given to understand, he talks about consensus, but we're given to understand also the core principles. They've been asked to identify a new leader and keep the opposition active. That is what the members of parliament, I think, from Mudavadi's side are saying, and they're threatening to kick out Raila Odinga also from the coalition as well.
Well, Debarl, you know, that's a non-starter. Because first of all, to ask members of parliament to identify a new leader in that context is not there, because Raila was never in parliament. In fact, of the 4 principles, only one was in parliament. And I have my own reservations about having parliamentary leadership that coincides with the leadership outside of parliament. But I think the point I was making is this. 2 things that should be clear. One is that, and I said this here last week, as far as I understand it, for me, that handshake was a talk about talks. We are yet to come to the situation where we start the meaningful talk. So the question of who has conceded, who has not conceded does not arise.
Right.
Secondly, we are the minority in parliament for now, and we will remain so. If this framework comes to fruition, which we expect it, I personally would foresee a fundamental rationalization of the governance structure in very many ways, including a reconsideration of our system of government, whether we still continue presidential or we go parliamentary.
All right.
And if we are going there, I also foresee some transitional arrangements. But we are not there, and that has nothing to do with parliamentary leadership. We will remain a minority, and we will do what we must do in parliament.
Let's leave it at that. Let's hear from Jared Okello as well. So ODM had a task force, and it seems maybe there was something up on their collective sleeves as well, because all this is coming now to the fore, and I think it was in the pipeline that they should be pulling out from NASA as it is right now, and also the minority leader from the Senate should actually be, you know, ousted. And that is Moses Wetang'ula. So was it also within the remit of a task force to really come up with this, because we don't really know what is happening? But of course, in light of all this task force being formed, and then you know, ODM saying, okay, now we can actually go it alone, we don't need NASA. Were they just using NASA as a tool to maybe to actually come up with a dialogue? Was that actually the end game?
Well, as a matter of fact, there have been many issues since the golden handshake. It indeed ruffled feathers the wrong way, particularly those who thought they ought to have been in that particular meeting, but were, for a reason or another, were left out. What we did indicate at the very beginning is that we needed to set the pace for any meaningful talks, therefore, to occur. And I think it was important that Raila Odinga reached out to Uhuru Kenyatta and vice versa, so that we can have, you know, constructive dialogue going forward. What has happened in the Senate, of course, the 3 of us, except one, sits at the Senate. And therefore, we are not in a better position to decide the fate, the future, or even the welfare of what happens at the Senate. I understand that Orengo has been proposed for reasons best known to senators allied to NASA to take charge as the minority leader. And we shall not delve very much into that, because none of us here sits at the Senate. At least Boni has been in the Senate before, but he's no longer there. So none of us.
But Wamatangi
sits at the Senate, but he belongs to the majority side. So, but this is a matter that rests with NASA. NASA as a coalition. But now, allow me to delve into an issue here.
But on page 5, before you even delve there, we have NASA senators split on Orengo's election as it is. You don't want to delve there. We have a story on page 5. Meeting to endorse senators minority leader was set to take place yesterday, and there were conflicting reports among NASA senators yesterday on when Siaya Senator James Orengo will be endorsed to replace his Bungoma colleague Moses Wetang'ula as the Senate minority leader. Mr. Orengo was expected to be endorsed as the NASA Senate Parliamentary Group meeting at the NASA Senate Parliamentary Group meeting yesterday after members expressed lack of confidence in Mr. Wetang'ula.
Yeah, well, NASA is composed of 28 senators, 20 from ODM, 4 allied to Wiper, 3 allied to ANC, and 1 for Kenya. So that is 28. But so far, what I have gathered is that 16 have since signed to have Orengo be replaced. So if a numerical strength is anything to be considered in this scenario, then definitely Orengo will win. But what Dr. Otiende did say, we ought not to, pass the buck and divert from the main goal. The main thing that we are looking at as a nation is to address fundamental issues up to and including electoral justice, the historical injustices. Today, the economy is not performing. Those are the fundamental issues to be looked at, including the police reforms that we have now lately seen a big slash on their salaries. But, trivializing what happens in NASA as regards the Senate to the detriment of the welfare of this country, to me, is passing the buck. But let me put something into perspective. My brother Boni Khalwale, a man I respect very much, and very few leaders who visited me even before I became a member of parliament, seems to be having great problems with brother James Orengo. Orengo, personally, Orengo wasn't at Harambee House. And therefore, any pronouncement that comes from him is either conjecture, propaganda, or as a third-party messenger. But he seems to be having a lot of attention to what Senator Jimmy says, more than what Baba, who was personally there and actually championed the talks, would be parading to the public. So Orengo basically is not a co-principal. So when NASA, our NASA coalition partners, tend to put more weight on what Orengo pronounces, to me, I think is diverting the attention from the core issues of unity within NASA.
Thank you. Let's leave it at that, and we hear from Wamatangi briefly. We'll come back to you, sir. Wamatangi.
Yes. First, let me say to my colleague here, Mheshimiwa Nyando here, that yes, that's true, that in the Senate, ODM has got majority of senators, and they've got quite a number combined now as NASA. But the numbers may not necessarily be accurate as 28, but suffice it to say that because Senate has got 47 elected members, Jubilee has a majority. But however, that's not the issue. I just wanted to correct that.
Yeah,
just something I wanted to deal with.
Before I sidetrack you a bit, because still on that particular issue of number, why is it becoming an issue right now? After the handshake, the dialogue, the concept of dialogue?
It's an issue, Debarl, because you see, when they have proposed from the ODM side that they would want to replace Wetangula with Orengo as their majority leader, then as you've seen and read in the papers, it's the ODM party mostly that have supported that move, and the few, as you've seen actually in some of the reports in the dailies, for example in Fort Kenya, it is only Wetangula alone who's been elected as a senator on Fort Kenya. And so it is now those are the three parties. That's Fort Kenya, ANC, and Wiper. Those are the few, the other senators who, in the NASA coalition, would be, or rather, have been agitating differently. That's why those numbers are important. But what I wanted to say is this, Debarl. You see, and this is probably to correct a few of the things that my good friend Senator Boni Khalwale has said. And I now come to that. First, even if they wanted, unless Wetangula and the rest of the team actually get into a negotiation and agree with the ODM, it is not possible, Boni, for them to retain any of the positions in Parliament. Not possible, even if they wanted. Reason? The standing orders of the House are very clear, including in the law. And it says that a person who shall be either minority leader shall be a person nominated by either a party or a coalition of parties with the second highest number of votes. So if you go to the second highest number of votes in Parliament, it is ODM. And so, other than them having an agreement with ODM, technically, they cannot hold any position because that's the law. That is the law. So on the question of that ANC combined with Wiper and the other one can have a small legal minority, so to say, and they would hold position is not feasible in law. And so I would just want to say to my good friend, and as the strategy is the way forward, probably if they want to negotiate the continued existence of and survival of some of their colleagues in that arrangement, they would have to negotiate. But lastly, it's also important to remind them that, and especially from the sentiments expressed by Boni, Debarl, we have all said this as politicians forever and ever. Politics is about numbers. It's about numbers. And if you look at their formations, whether the three combined continue to act the way they're acting and complaining and lamenting and philosophizing, they must remember that when they went to the table after the elections, what is counted, what actually determines your power, your force, you are negotiating argument for that matter, or the size of the cake you get is the number of people that you have. And if you look at the NASA coalition anyway, and I don't want to belabor the point, it is obvious that it is Raila Odinga who has delivered majority of members of the National Assembly, majority of members of county assemblies, majority of members of senators, and so that's the way it is. That's the reality. And let's also remember about this quit thing, and that's what I'm saying. Probably, as I started, I said the best way for these three guys is to stop throwing tantrums and find their way in.
Thank you.
You remember, there was a time when actually they have been dared by Raila that anyone who wants to quit, and that time I remember it was actually Wetangula who had, before he was admitted as a full principal, I think those days he was a headmaster. There was a time he was told, you quit if you want to quit. And the party will continue. So the threats of quitting or seceding, from NASA to another whatever,
Thank you.
may not really.
Let's bring it to a close and introduce also Kimani Ichung'wah as well. Good morning.
Morning, Debarl.
Yeah. Yes. NASA, is it crumbling? Yeah. Are they not also members of all the core principles? Are they really burying their heads in the sand as far as NASA is concerned? Very briefly, we want to.
Debarl, if you ask me if NASA is crumbling, I'll tell you I don't know because I'm not a member of NASA. But from the look of things,
yes,
I think Kenyans can only thank God that NASA never ever got into government, because they're just getting a glimpse of what would have happened if these people were in government. So for me, it's an opportunity for Kenyans to thank God that at least it's Jubilee that is in government. And as one solid political party, if NASA was in government, believe me, the squabbles would even be worse, and this country would not progress. But from the look of things, it's clear that they're actually not speaking from the same page. And I was listening to Boni as I came, asking ODM leaders to vacate their positions of the minority in both houses, including those of parliamentary committees that are headed by the minority in parliament. And I wondered, Boni being the deputy leader of Ford Kenya,
whether he also agrees with the Senate in asking the leader in the minority in the Senate to also vacate his position, considering that he has only one member in the Senate who is himself. And Senator Wamatangi has clearly articulated that. But the other thing that I heard was my friend here, Otiende, mentioned that this handshake is more futuristic than the present. But I want to say it is both present and futuristic. The two leaders are looking at Kenya presently as it is. That Kenyans, and they said it in their statement, if you read their statement, they said that between both of them, they symbolize the full cycle of political divisions that this country has gone through. And they said they do not want it to be in their time as leaders that this country will go to the dogs and those political divisions to continue. And they identified particular issues that they want to address. Therefore, I completely disagree with Boni when he says that Uhuru Kenyatta is cracking his ribs with laughter because he's gotten everything that he wanted, and ODM as a political party or NASA or Raila Odinga has gotten nothing. Because Boni, really, that is what bedevils this country, that we always look at our nation in terms of individualistic gains. And both Raila and Uhuru Kenyatta have said, for them it is not about any individualistic gains. It's about the nation. It's about bringing the nation together. And therefore we should not be looking at ODM having lost anything or Jubilee gaining anything. It's about Kenya. It's about Kenya gaining. It's about Kenyans coming together. It's about Kenyans being able to work together and moving away from divisive elections, moving away from ethnicity. And we cannot by any means underestimate the power and the influence that Raila Odinga has in this country. With over 6 million Kenyans that voted for him.
Yes.
Him engaging with Uhuru Kenyatta, they were the main protagonists in the last two elections, in 2013 and 2017. And both of them agreeing to now sit together and have a forum where they can discuss on those issues that bring us apart. I think it's something that is both present and good for the future of this country, and we should all be in support. In terms of whether NASA is going to split or not, I think time will tell us. But I can only thank God that they are not in government, because this country would never have been the same again.
All right. Briefly from Boni Khalwale, is it a rejoinder?
I want to respond to
Please,
the
very
concerns by Ichung'wah on what my position is on the removal of Wetangula. Very clear. Logic demands that we remember why Wetangula became the leader of the minority. It is because of the fact that it was NASA which was the minority. The fact that none other than James Orengo is leading, who was his own deputy, is leading the ODM members to make that resolution, speaks to the fact that he is no longer pushing the agenda of NASA. He's pushing the agenda of ODM. That being the case, I want to tell the ODM legislators to do it quickly. The country cannot continue waiting that will they not remove Wetangula. Let them do it quickly. If it is the leader of the minority office that they want, take it, and take it quickly. We want hygiene in the way politics are done. There is a whole chapter 6, reserved in our constitution on matters of integrity. So they should take it away. Wetangula is not going to die. I want supporters of Wetangula, local and national, to know that what is happening is the adage in Luya, which says if you want to kill a dog, you first start saying that this dog eats eggs and do that. You give that dog a bad name. So these things you are seeing them say, Wetangula is a stumbling block to their collective interests and so on, and that's why they should remove. They are simply giving him a bad name. Our responsibility as members of the coalition was to give our support to Raila. All politics being local, I'm proud to report to Kenyans that we did it so well that 95% of our local votes went to Baba. What more could we have done? Did they want us to go and break into State House so as to install him? It was not feasible. So that anger should go away, remove Wetangula. We want to move on. We're going to move on as the opposition, and we are going to deliver. Otiende, I'm very worried about you. Be strong. Don't be swayed by the need for you to play to the gallery. You cannot expect the reform agenda that is so vital at the moment to be pushed by Jubilee and ODM at the moment. We've learned that in history, reform is only pushed by the opposition. 1991, one-party state, you remember, it is the opposition that pushed it. The 2005 WACO draft was defeated because of a concerted effort of opposition voices. We got a constitution in 2010 thanks to the opposition. And we reformed the IEBC before the last election thanks to the opposition. So don't take it lightly that you don't need the opposition. And even more important, the four of you are all our parliamentarians. On this panel, you are not speaking to the important issue of the legislation that will be required. You're just saying because Raila will sit there and some experts from his side and Uhuru, that will be it. No, that is not the way governments are run. That is not the way countries are run. Countries are run through law. So you will need to do legislation. And if you are confused the way you are, that you don't know whether you are in government or you are in the opposition, you are not going to deliver.
All right, thank you.
Go and sit on the government side, allow the 50 members of parliament of the opposition to push the reform agenda.
All right, I want us to bring it to a close, and unless you have a rejoinder, then we come to Jared, and then we bring it to a close, right?
I must surely have a rejoinder.
Rejoin.
When Dr. Khalwale so blatantly says that he's worried about me, then proceeds to say things that he knows nothing about, then I am worried. I am worried because, first of all, Dr. Khalwale does not remember that I said here that necessarily for this framework agreement and the issues it identified, I foresee a situation of having change of legislation, including the constitution. Then he does not remember that. But secondly, Dr. Khalwale does not remember that this constitution, in terms of the legislature, there is no mention of the word opposition. And that is what I was telling him. If it comes to parliament, there's only the majority and the minority. But lastly, Dr. Khalwale forgets a very fundamental thing. The entire framework agreement and that handshake identified issues that were the two gentlemen believed to be fundamental. That is the basis of reform that we are talking about. It is not that anybody is saying that now that they shook each other's hand, all the reforms we want are done. The difference is, Dr. Khalwale believes that unless you have a term of called opposition in parliament, that then the reforms cannot be driven. In fact, history of this country shows that the only time we have meaningful reforms is if the two major political establishments are agreed on certain fundamentals. That is why we have this constitution. Had Raila and Mwai Kibaki not at least agreed on the fundamentals, we would not be having the constitution.
Thank you for the rejoinder. Let's hear from Jared briefly.
Well, I just want to put a rejoinder on what my brother Kimani Ichung'wah, Honorable, has said concerning NASA not in government, and that therefore a blessing in disguise. Well, this is one of the few members of parliament I respect from the other side. In fact, since the golden handshake, he has donated his minutes to me in parliament.
Here.
And that is a matter of fact. So anyway, we all understand the NASA principles. All of them have been in government. We all know their contributory roles while in government. In fact, Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto are both beneficiaries of shuttle diplomacy employed by none other than Kalonzo Musyoka. So we cannot therefore say that those who are in NASA do not have the wherewithal and conviction to run government. Secondly, we all understand the infrastructural developments that were initiated by Raila Odinga, including his Thika superhighway, where he can drive at 200 kilometers an hour. That was done by none other than Raila Odinga, and many others that were established in this country. Of course, we know about Mudavadi re-establishing the economy when it was to the death at its deathbed. And we know what Wetangula has done on matters foreign affairs. So when you hear squabbles, firstly, squabbles are a testament that democracy is working within NASA. Otherwise, it would be a one-man guitar, one-man affair. But for NASA principals to also poke holes on the processes and engagements of other principals is a very good thing. That is healthy, both for NASA and for the Republic of Kenya. And therefore, we cannot therefore say that because there are squabbles within NASA, this is therefore a wrong party to ascend and to presidency. We also understand what happens when these guys go to State House. The Riots Act is read from morning to evening, and then they come out without any contribution by any member of parliament. So these are things that we don't want to see. NASA is a party that champions democracy and democratic ideals and doesn't have disdain for that same democracy.
Right. Now we want to gravitate, unless you have other issues with NASA. This is a developing story we have to see, and we've got a long way to go.
Just to finish, if you allow me, we are not intending to move into government. That should be made very clear. Either coming from my brother Boni Khalwale or my colleagues from the other political aisle, we are going to play our cardinal responsibilities as minority in the House.
But how, no, just a moment. No. But how do you hold the brief? No, just a moment. No, we'll come to you. Let me ask Jared a question. You're not intending to move into government. You're holding brief for ODM, you're holding brief for NASA, you're holding brief for who?
Well, firstly, I was elected as a member of parliament under ODM ticket. So firstly, every pronouncement that I make is from ODM. Then secondly, and most fundamentally, I belong to NASA coalition. And what I did indicate is that those, concerns, squabbles, gravitating towards other way is just because we embrace democracy.
So on record, we'll be here maybe at some other time, if at all, that we will not see a formation of a new office for the Right Honorable Raila Odinga as the official opposition figure in Parliament, because you intend not to move in government at all, and if you will not be under ODM.
Well, let me put it this way.
Just a moment.
Jubilee Party is the party in power. I am not going to resign as ODM member and seek re-election under Jubilee so that I join government.
Okay. Let me help you. Okay. No. Let's say for Wamatangi, then we'll come to you. Otherwise,
Debarl, actually,
you'll frame me.
I just wanted to correct that opinion as made by my good friend here, but not in context, but in precisely what he was trying to express, only expression-wise, because see, there has been this misconception, and I believe that was the basis upon which the president and the leader of the opposition, so to say, Raila Odinga, that was the basis of their handshake. The understanding that government is not necessarily the parties as we see them. Once a party has won and formed government, but in the entire context of this constitution, these gentlemen themselves are in government. They are in government. The constitution recognizes that when you're in the minority, when you're in the majority, and you are an elected member of parliament or in the county assemblies, you are in government. When you are in the judiciary, you're in government. When you're in the executive, you're in government. The only thing that one would argue is, are they going to join Jubilee, or are they going to remain in ODM? That is a question. And they don't have to join Jubilee. The invitation and the basis of that handshake was not to invite them to join Jubilee. It is to recognize that all of us put together have a responsibility, that we are all in government, and after the elections we must run the country as expected by the Constitution. Yes, that's how the law expresses it.
I think the true misconception is that ODM is joining government. And you could argue that being in the minority, you are still in the legislative arm of government, as Senator Wamatangi argues. But really, Kenyans' understanding of being in government is joining the executive arm of government. And ODM, and under the framework that Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga agreed on, there is nothing to do with them getting into executive arm of government. The narrative I hear you pushing of an office being created for the Right Honorable Raila Odinga, I don't think it was anywhere within what Ambassador Kimani and Paul Mwangi are working on, creation of an office. If you looked at the issues they identified, there are particular issues that are of concern to Kenyans, issues that bedevil our politics over the years. that every 5 years you have issues to do with divisive elections and ethnicity, Kenyans having to fight after every 5 years, after every election, that we can never move on as a country. And I think Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta, what they have done, is recognizing their role now as national leaders. And I repeat, Debarl, what I said from their own statement, that having represented the full cycle of those political divisions, they want to bring it to an end. That come 2022, and there are also those who have argued that this has something to do with succession politics. It has absolutely nothing to do with succession politics. Come 2022, we want Kenyans to be able to compete on the basis of the policies and ideals that they will advance and sell to the Kenyan people. And they compete purely on those, not on ethnicity and personality-based politics that we have been used to in the past.
Thank you.
And Debarl, appreciate one thing, and you must give credit where it's due, because this credit is due to the leadership in Jubilee. The last election in 2017, to a great extent, we moved from the politics of ethnicity and insults and personalities, and we started seeing even NASA as a coalition address issues. You remember they were advancing the issue of free secondary education, including boarding and including uniforms, provision of uniforms, and even exercise books and pencils to students. Well, we were advancing that of free day secondary education. Therefore, we are advancing our politics. And for our democracy to be able to mature, we must come to that level where Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta, two great Kenyans who want to leave a legacy in this country at the end of this probably 5 years or in the next few years, that they want to leave a country that is one, united, where we never have to fight over politics, that you bring to an end that divisive era of politics that we have gone through over the years, that we will compete on policies.
Thank
and
you.
After elections, we close ranks and start rebuilding our country.
Thank you. Let's hear from Dr. Otiende. Just briefly wind up on this. Let's not belabor the point.
Just 3 quick points. First, I think it is always very important, and we've had this discussion before here, that when we discuss government in that sense, we must distinguish between the state and government. There's a way in which, if you use the word government, it defines all the structures of the state. But the more common parlance is to say government when you mean the executive. And to that extent, therefore, we are not joining the executive. We are part of government because we are part of the legislature. Just the same way Dr. Khalwale is leader, therefore, is part of government in that common parlance. But secondly, is it plausible, as you're saying, that now they'll create an office for Raila within parliament as leader of opposition and all? I think the problem we all have here and out there is that we're all debating in ignorance. The initiative was taken by two gentlemen. In the document they have shared with the whole country, they have established an office which is supposed to identify advisors, which thereafter will identify the proper roadmap. We are in no position to start conjecturing. But if you ask me, it is within the realm of possibility that if the issues identified, and I've said before, there are many more that are not there, which must be identified. If those issues we are to get to the bottom of them, then it must be contemplated, at least in my view, that we will eventually must have some constitutional amendments. We must have some statutory and legislative amendments. But in the meantime, it is possible we might have some administrative arrangements that do not need any statutory amendments. So to that extent, it is possible that you could create a secretariat for that office. It is possible that to identify the role and statesmanship of Raila Odinga, he could be given an office as an administrative arrangement. But for all the other fundamental ones, there will have to be legislative and constitutional amendments. And lastly, I shy away from going and discussing the merits of Jubilee, as Kimani Ichung'wah keeps coming back to. Because extolling the virtues of Jubilee does not help move the country forward. All the things I've said about the Jubilee government, I do not retract them at all. But I do not need to debate them now. Because basically what Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga are telling us is that we have our differences. And we can debate them, we can expose them, we can talk about them. But without abandoning any of our positions, let us see how we can find a working formula moving forward, because it is true that despite all that we've tried in the last 5.5 decades, it has not worked. And I think that is reasonable. But the more we go back to our original positions, who's good and who's bad,
Yes.
then the more we will derail even that futuristic effort.
So we'll be stuck in that morass as well,
Yes.
right? Okay, so let's just look at our crystal balls moving forward. You as Kenyans.
You've not given me.
Oh, I've given you a chance. I thought you were winding up with...
No.
Very briefly. You'll be the last one then.
Yes, thank you. It's important for Kenyans to know that the problem in this country is because of impunity. Thanks to impunity, every 10 years, we have seen what is happening in the so-called handshake take place. Kenyans will remember that after the 1997 election, LDP was led by Raila for a handshake with Moi. They formed a new CAN. 10 years later, in 2007, Raila went for a handshake with Kibaki. He led ODM. 10 years later, in 2017, he has gone for a handshake with Uhuru. Otiende Amollo and Kimani Ichung'wah. Let me tell you, these are serious issues. The reform we need so that the winner of the election is decided by the voter and not by some mandarins either in IBC or elsewhere, is the reform that is not going to come the moment you allow the leader of the opposition, Raila, to go to bed with the leader of government. I can assure you, Okello, thanks to your inexperience, Kimani Ichung'wah will tell you, now that you're with him in government, that when Uhuru and Raila will bring a bill to the House, you will be whipped by your respective parliamentary groups, and you'll be told, go and vote this way. You're going to vote that way. It is only the opposition that will then input the views of the public. And this is why, Otiende, don't worry about Article 108 that defines officers of parliament, leader of majority and minority. The same article identifies as the opposition by saying the ones who are not in government. Invariably, when you are not in government, you normally find that it is because you didn't make enough MPs and you became president. So we need that, whether you call it opposition or minority, people to check the government. And if you don't check the government, the corruption that has been perpetuated by Jubilee over the last 5 years is only going to double. What you'll basically be doing, your leaders will end up being part of the gravy train. That is not why you were our head of the office of the ombudsman. You have credentials to defend.
You know,
All right. No. Boni,
when you raise that issue,
we were winding up on
I
this.
just wanted Boni to be clear. You know, when
Yes.
you say that
Yes.
that the views of the public at that time then can only be expressed by those few you call would be the opposition.
Yes.
I want you to be reminded
Yes.
that those leaders, even as you call them from the majority or wherever,
Yes.
are elected by the same public. And even during that handshake, the intent, the context, the message is on behalf of the same public. And the question here is, who is the majority of the public then? Between your view and the other.
Thank you. Let's leave it at
I
that.
think that the only difference,
Thank you,
Boni,
Wamatangi.
is this, that the view you have, the nature and style of expression of opposition yourself in the legislature is what is different, because it is your perception that unless there is confrontation, unless there is name calling,
Thank you, Wamatangi.
unless there is visible tagging,
All right, we'll leave it at that. Thank you.
You're opposing.
Thank you.
But it can be done as you correctly said yourself earlier.
Okay,
with
thank you.
hygiene.
Wamatangi, thank you. Right, we'll leave it at that right now.